This is, as far as I can tell, the world's first open-source general-purpose multimeter. And it's got a few tricks up its sleeve. The main goal with this project is to put together a modular system of designs for a multimeter that is at least roughly on par with existing offerings in terms of features and functionality. Things like cat-rated input protection and guaranteed accuracy are less important to me. Secondary goals are to add a few things that I want out of a multimeter, particularly a solid data interface. Logging and remote control is so useful in a multimeter, but often absent from all but the highest end, and even then tends to be fairly limited relative to benchtop meters. This project started in 2017 when I was an intern. I had to take a bunch of temperature measurements over about 8 hours every couple of minutes, and that was boring. I mentioned this to my supervisor the next day, and he pointed out that we had the USB cable for the multimeter that we were using for reference. In about 20 minutes, I was able to write up a script to automatically log all this to file, and was able to go spend the rest of the day doing anything else. I was so sold on logging multimeters at this point that when I went home, I went to go get one for myself, but all the commercial offerings were, well, pretty expensive for a 19-year-old intern, and if I was going to invest that much, I wanted it to be pretty much perfect for me, and nothing really struck me as exactly what I was looking for. So I looked to open source options and was very surprised that there's pretty much nothing in this space. So I started poking at how difficult would this be to do myself. This stayed as sort of sketches and in the background for about 5 years until the months leading up to the Hackaday 2023 SuperCon. I finally got in gear and got the electronics working, but the firmware was limited and the case left something to be desired. During the next year, during which I totally worked on this consistently and chipped away at it and didn't work for 12 hours occasionally and then forget about it for months, I was able to iterate the firmware to a place that I was happy with, and a few weeks before the 2024 SuperCon, got the case to a point that I was happy with it. And that's where the project stands today. It's far from a finished product, but is a functional, open-source multimeter. Hydra Meter has all the normal functions you'd expect in a multimeter: DC and AC voltage and current, resistance, continuity, and diode test. In terms of banner specs, it's about 3.5 digits, and can handle up to 150 volts and 10 amps. With standard 10 amp, milliamp, and microamp ranges. The input protection on voltage and current should be able to handle overloads gracefully, but I've only assembled 2 of these, so I'm not really looking to push that. Resistance can go up to 10 meg, and diode test can go up to 7 volts. It's also got a few little quality of life improvements as well, things like simultaneous voltage and current measurement, and it can calculate power from that. Fuses built right into the front panel, so you don't have to disassemble the meter just to get at them, and galvanically isolated USB serial built right in. Further secondary goals are mainly things I didn't want to compromise relative to existing meters. Battery life should be in the hundreds of hours. Resistance and other functions should be on the voltage jack rather than a separate jack. Diode test should be at least 3.6 volts for testing LEDs. Size should be on par with at most the larger end of commercial meters. Other than these rocker switches for ranging, which we'll get to in a second, this should look, feel, and function much like any other meter out there. It also has a few less common features. The display is detachable and wirelessly linked to the front end, has a graphical LCD which can display up to 8 measurements at once, and has USB-C serial built in, no more weirdly expensive isolated cables. More advanced modes aren't hidden behind soft keys either. Instead, everything is set solely by the state of these rocker switches on the front panel. My favorite part, though, is this module. I can't tell you how many times I've had to jam probes into some connector and try not to short it out, or make several different measurements and do conversions by hand or in some spreadsheet, or make some one-off test jig for a project. This module connector exposes 4 analog inputs to the main ADC, as well as a couple of digital I/O, SPI, I2C, and UART. This makes it very easy to create a front end for just about anything you could want. Thermocouples, RTDs, load cells, 4 to 20 milliamp loops, or, for example, in the case of this one, voltage and current between a pair of XT60 connectors. I use these all the time and find it frustrating to try to stick a probe into these connectors and risk shorting them out, and can't measure current because a lot of things have inrush and will blow out the fuse on a normal meter. With this, though, I was able to build this in about 2 hours or so with a piece of perf board and some op amps, and suddenly I can just plug my connectors directly into this and measure voltage, current, and power simultaneously. The case of the meter is 3D printed, and all of the parts inside are relatively commodity and off the shelf. The total cost is around $100, including the board. All design files are linked below, along with more detailed explanations for how everything works. I'll also be making a video soon going through the design in more technical depth. I'm thinking of doing a small production run of a few dozen up to maybe 100 or so of a revision 2 of this. There's a survey below, and I'd appreciate feedback on interest in that, as well as additional features or modules you'd be interested in. And if you're on the fence or lukewarm to it, what sorts of changes you'd like to see. One particular change I've been thinking of is making a rotary switch an option in a future revision, so let me know if that's important to you. If you'd like to keep up to date with the project and know when it's available to order, there's an optional field in that survey for your email as well. I promise to keep those interesting and infrequent. So, thank you for your feedback, and thanks for watching.